but you said something that got me thinking about, um, well, my special favorite, the inner critic, um, and then yours. One of the things I was looking at in Swipe a couple of days ago was imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
So could you talk a little bit more about that, especially as it pertains to indie authors? I
Yeah.
mean, indie books, obviously, I feel like indie authors are at least as valuable and as valid as people who publish with big houses. But
Well, I think that's where the voices come from. And it's funny because I just booked. I don't think I have a date yet. I just booked a podcast called "Let's Talk About Imposter Syndrome."
great.
I'll send you the link if you want. But
Good.
no, I mean, writers are particularly vulnerable to imposter syndrome because I see this. I'm on all kinds of boards on Facebook and on LinkedIn and so on. I left Twitter since that person
Yeah,
bought it. The day he bought it, I bailed on Twitter. In fact, I took your recommendation and got on Post. I like Post so far.
pretty nice, huh?
But I see this all the time in all the different online writers groups I'm part of, where people ask things like, and I see it at Quora all the time as well. What do I have to do to be a writer? What? And I just think, okay, that's the wrong question.
Yeah,
There is a tremendous sense of having to um, having to pass initiation of some kind. The writer's version of the Animal House scene, the spanking, and then thank you, sir, may I have another? Which being edited, by the way, that can be that painful on occasion. Um, but because I've been edited that hard before, it's like, dang, that was rough. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's the sense that what do I have to do to be a writer? Well, if you're writing, you're a writer. Now,
exactly.
are you a published writer? Not necessarily. Are you a professional writer? Not necessarily. There are criteria to meet. But I mean, the difference between being a professional writer and non-professional writer is someone's paying you for your writing. That's
Exactly.
it. Doesn't mean you're not a good writer. It means you haven't gotten the right market yet. So there's a tremendous amount of imposter syndrome when it comes to, because you've heard me say this, I'm sure. There is no profession that has more mythology and nonsense attached to it than writing.
Talk about some of that.
Well, people believe that I mean, I think I said this in one of the questions that either that or I posed the question, but it's one of my stock answers, and it has the virtue of being true, which is people make the mistake of viewing writing as some sort of calling. It's a profession, just like anything else, with its own professional rules and its own skill sets. And if you're sitting around waiting for inspiration to strike, and you're not learning about the business, and you're not learning why literary agents do what they do and how they get paid, and if you're not learning what's published by the big houses and what's not, and what's published by small presses and what's published by hybrids and so on, then you're wasting your time. I
Right.
would love to see people demythologize it more. If you take the mythology away from writing, I think you'd have a lot fewer people with imposter syndrome because they realize the entry tunnel is not that complicated. Write good stuff and keep writing lots of good stuff and write lots of bad stuff because that's how you're going to get better. You know,
Exactly.
the other part of finishing that takes me back to the finishing question, which the other part of finishing is it's simple and it sounds simplistic, but just don't stop when
Right.
you think what you're writing. Because I've done this. I've written a lot of books, and I still have books. I did this not long ago. I was working on a book that I thought, this doesn't feel right. I was probably 45,000 words into the manuscript, and I just thought something is about this is off to me. But I said to myself, okay, I'm not the best judge of that. I'm following the rules and the patterns and the organization and structure that I know my client approved, that I approve, that I know works. I'm going to bowl through this and see what the client says. And I finished it, sent it off. Everybody loved it. So I thought, obviously for some reason I was perceiving incorrectly, but I didn't stop. Now I didn't stop because I was being paid to get this book delivered, and I have a professional obligation and a financial interest in doing that. But just don't stop, because I'm gonna just throw out a number and say 50% of that writer self hatred of their work is just based on self-doubt that has no basis in reality. It's just it's imposter syndrome. It's I suck at this. I'm terrible. Why did I ever think I could write? And so on. And don't give in to that and keep going. And I think you'll get a lot farther than you think. So,
I think so. I think you and I need to do a demythologizing project. It could be
that would be
interesting.
smart. That would
Yeah.
be smart.
Anyway, speaking of finishing things, we've been going on and on because we started a little bit before the recording for almost an hour now. Um, I'm looking forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks
Yeah.
in the face, as my 3-year-old used to say. My then 3-year-old used to say, instead of in person. It's like I get to see you in the face. 3 is my favorite age. I have a grandchild that's 3 now. Um, so that's exciting. You're going to get to meet your co-presenter, who's going to talk to us all about marketing. This is somebody who is just blowing the doors off of some indie publishing sales. Something that all of us need to learn more about, I think, um, and come away with some concrete plans. So, finishing, swipe. What would you like to leave our listeners with, our viewers, or whoever, our audience with about? First of all, I want to say swipethebook.com
Thank
is
you.
where you can find it right now.
Very subtle.
Published on the first day of spring, I believe,
That's
March
correct.
21st.
That's correct.
He couldn't wait 2 days for my birthday.
All right.
Um,
I didn't have. It wasn't my decision. I would have told them.
all right, you're forgiven.
The other day.
So, if you wanted to leave people with a short, pithy statement about the science behind why we don't finish.
Actually, I don't. I want to because I'm not. I want to address a question you said or something you said a minute ago, and I am running out of battery power by the way because I was dumb enough not to plug in. So we should wrap up soon anyway. um, it was about indie authors.
Yeah.
Um, because it's a it's a difficult slot to be in because you're perceived as wannabes in some cases as amateurs and so on. But that's where new voices come from. The new voices that may or may not eventually move to the big publishers. A lot fewer are doing that, by the way. A lot are going with some of the next tier publishers down, like the Turners and Kensingtons, or even smaller, because they're getting better service and they're getting taken care of better rather than by the big corporate conglomerates. But indie authors are that's where we find all the fresh voices and the fresh ideas. So they're an incredibly important part of the landscape, especially if you're thinking about it from a non-commercial perspective. I mean, ultimately, writing is about ideas, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, or essays or poetry, and you're not going to find a huge. You do find some great thinkers and some great idea people in books from the big five, or if you want to include like Wiley and so on, the big 6 or 7. You do find them, but more often than not, you're going to find the real boundary pushers in the indies because they're the people who don't worry about platform right off the bat. They're thinking about how can I write something great, and how can I write something that I don't really care if it can get picked up by HarperCollins because it doesn't fit a genre, but it's my best work. So that's where those people cut their teeth, is in publishing, with little outfits in Berkeley or Boston or places like that that aren't all based in Manhattan. So, I'd say indie authors are an incredibly important part of the ecosystem in all of this. Probably going to become a more important part, especially as the publishing industry changes and as the dinosaurs start to hopefully die off or evolve or something, so that they stop treating their authors and their employees so badly.
It's funny, I was thinking about the changes in the publishing landscape since you and I met way back in the early 2000s. It's phenomenal, and I think it's going to continue to evolve and change in ways that we can't even think about yet. We can't even imagine.
Somebody's going to break the model at some point. Somebody is going to come up with some way to distribute and market books that is completely completely unique and totally disruptive. And
You may find out about that on February 16th and 17th at the at our
that is
special
actually a great
Bruins
conversation for
journey.
a pub crawl because breaking the publishing world calls for alcohol. So,
Yes, yes, but your co-presenter is also breaking some marketing rules and
oh, I know. Curious to hear about that
modes,
stuff.
and yeah, she's kicking butt, taking names. So, my dear, thank you so much for your time. I'm thrilled that you're going to come be with us and connect with our indies. And give my love to the girls.
I will, all three of them.